my discernment is always informing my enablement. It's so hard for me to separate the two. They're so linked together. So my discernment is constantly informing my enablement.
Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything that has to do with the 6 types of working genius, how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by Cody Thompson, my co-host, and blast from the past, our good friend Tracy Noble. We twisted her arm and had her join our podcast.
She's back.
She's back, and she's better than ever.
Happy to be here.
And Cody, what's our topic going to be today?
She said that pretty unconvincingly, Pat. Happy to be here.
Just this one time, I'm happy to be here.
Our topic is, it's an E thing.
That's right. We are going to talk about the subtleties of the enablement genius, because we keep exploring more. And because Tracy is an E, a DE, she's going to join us because we needed to dissect her and understand this E thing better. And when we say that Tracy doesn't like to be on the podcast, it's funny because I've been out before with Tracy and doing talks or around the country, and people know it's Tracy. They hear her voice or they find out, and they're like, "We love when you're on the podcast. We think she's fantastic." She doesn't really enjoy doing it. So we honor that, and but it's great to have you back, Tracy.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I much prefer being behind the scenes.
Yes. Well, you have a lot of talent. Okay, so here's the thing about enablement. It's really layered. It's easy to look at enablement in a simple way, just like they're friendly, they like to help. And I think that's one of the things about people with enablement. Sometimes they don't understand the genius that it is. And there's a lot of subtleties in this, and that's what we're going to unpack today. And I don't want to throw you under the bus here, Cody, but do you want to? Is there something you want to start with?
Well, I was just thinking, Pat, that we did an episode, probably in the first 10 episodes that we started the podcast with, that was like why we chose the word enablement and some of the nuances that we understood at the time. But I think what's really interesting is that we're 4 years into this, and we have conversations like this in the office that are like, so what is that really? And we're learning more about what each genius is. And enablement, even 4 years ago, I think what we thought we understood about what that genius really is and how it shows up on teams and interpersonally, we have a better understanding of that now. I think it's just kind of fun to explore this like additive knowledge that we're coming to as we've had more experience with people with enablement and just had some of these conversations.
And the other thing is, and then people that don't have it, or like you and I that have it as a working frustration, we were talking to somebody in our office yesterday, and she's like, "I just don't get why you guys do what you do." And Tracy, what is it like? Well, I'm going to turn to you and say, does it feel, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this, right?
Yeah, I think initially it was so helpful for me to understand the working genius theory, because I always thought I was just a pushover or a people pleaser. And I didn't really understand the value of my enablement genius. And I think the fact that I get joy and energy from helping people, I can't help but help. And so many people who don't have enablement as a genius don't understand that. Like Tara yesterday, when she was like, "What is that? Is that E thing that you do?" It's like this mystery to her, and it's so interesting because I can't help but help. And it's not me people pleasing. It's just I love to support and serve.
That's so interesting because for a variety of reasons that we won't go into here, wound stuff, I'm a people pleaser. Growing up, I was a people pleaser. That is totally independent of my working genius. Mm-hmm. And so there are people that are people pleasers that do have enablement. There are people that are people pleasers that don't have enablement. And then there's people that aren't people pleasers at all, but because of enablement, they're very quick and natural to provide what others need on their terms. It gives them joy and energy.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, Pat, that we've been chatting about is because, we talked about the 3 stages of the geniuses. We have the WI, wonder and invention, is the ideation, innovation sort of part of work. The discernment and galvanizing as the activation stage, and then enablement and tenacity being the stage of implementation. And what's really interesting is like I think what we've observed, because even Tracy, as you say, like, I can't help but not help, I can't not help someone. That's sort of even a reductionist view of what enablement is. It's not just the helping thing. It's what we're discovering is that first part of implementation is they're a people-oriented initiation of implementation. So it's like, whereas tenacity is more task-oriented, where they're really about getting the job over the finish line, there's this like really strategic glue type thing that happens with enablement, which means that we're going to start this process of getting things done, but we're going to bring everybody along in the process. We're not going to leave anybody behind. And so they respond to galvanizing, they respond to people requesting help, but it actually is really interesting that their focus in implementation is really about the relational aspect, the people aspect, more than it is about the task.
And what's interesting about that, Cody, is that if you're an E, you have enablement as a genius, so you get joy and energy from it. But you don't have T. Let's say it's in your. We often assume that a person with E also has T. If you're working on something and helping people, and suddenly the human element of it goes away, and it's just finishing it for the sake of finishing it. If you don't have any T in your genius or your competency, you'll be like, okay, I'm done. If you don't see any connection to what you're doing to how it serves somebody else, and we often throw E and T together, but there are people that have E as a genius and T as a frustration, and finishing after the human side is there is not all that interesting to them.
Yeah, I can tell when we cross over into T territory, my energy just gets sucked out. It is just something happens where we cross over, and I'm not that interested in the task. When the people go away, I'm not that interested in it.
I was just going to say, I was talking to you guys about our technology team that we partner with, and we looked at their team map. It was really interesting because they had a lot of discernment and a lot of tenacity and very little enablement. And so the other thing it does is I was kind of doing a working genius session for them. And I said, hey, so probably what happens is we come to these meetings, we figure out what we need to do, and then you all go out to your desk or your office or sort of individually, and you do your coding, whatever else you do, but it feels very isolated. Like you're going to get all of the work done, but you probably are not bringing everybody along and having a good time doing it. And they were like, yeah, that's exactly what we do. So there's that glue element where it's like, I think, Pat, I've heard you in speeches talk about teams that lack enablement might get things done in silos. Like they're more prone to silos because they don't have that person that wants to bring everybody together.
That's exactly right. And that's what's so interesting. Now here's an interesting example, though. So Tracy, since we started the company, she was our CFO, our CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. She was product development. She edits the book. She does everything. She has done everything in our company. One of the things she had to do was like employee benefits for us. Mm-hmm. And we were always like, oh gosh, thank God that Tracy does this but she knew that it mattered to us and our families. So she would have to finish that. If that were something that had no impact on a person's real life, she would be like, I don't want to do this. So it's as long as there's a connection to someone's satisfaction, a human being, it really matters to her. By the way, Cody, I want to stop right now and congratulate you on using the word reductionist. That was very impressive. I like that word.
Thank you.
I'm like, wow.
You've worked with me for 10 years, and the fact that I used a big word is impressive.
I'm going to find a way to work it into every conversation I have. But anyway, so Tracy has that E, and she can do T things when it's in service of other people. Now, here is the other thing about this, the E thing that I think is really hard. And I've violated this many times because I love what people with enablement do for a team. I often attribute it to their kindness, to their virtue. Now, many people I know that have enablement are virtuous, but and Tracy confirmed this for us, and this is really interesting. They do get pleasure and satisfaction and energy from doing what they do. So when I say there's a nurse and she's an angel because she responds to a patient, now she is, or he is, but as Tracy said, keep in mind, they actually like doing that kind of work. And so to attribute that just to their kindness sometimes can be a misattribution. And I want Tracy to explain this because I feel bad even saying that.
Because it is self-serving in some ways. It sounds weird to say, but it is. I do like to think that I'm nice or kind, but it's separate from my genius of enablement, because
Right.
I really lean into that service support because it fills me up. So it does serve me. It is a selfish thing to some extent.
Now, I suppose you could work for a drug dealer or a terrorist and you would still have enablement and be like, oh, can I get you more ammunition? Or can I, whatever. But so you could apply that in a very bad way.
Of course.
But the point here is, like, a person who loves being a nurse, they can have a good heart, but they would also say, you have to understand, I actually love doing this work.
So true.
And that's worth understanding, because sometimes a person will look at somebody with enablement and they'll say, oh, you are so sacrificial. So Tara was saying to us yesterday that when she lived in New York, she was at a point in her life where she wanted to do hard things for spiritual reasons. So she would go work at a soup kitchen, and she said it was so painful for her, and she was doing it to mortify herself, essentially, to say, I'm going to do something hard for others, even though it's really difficult for me. Whereas another person could say, I actually love doing that, right? And Tracy, you actually said when you were younger, you wanted to be a nurse.
Yeah, I mean, I was going down that path my freshman year in college. That spoke to me, and life took me in another direction, but I would have loved that. Maybe in my next career, that's something I'll pursue.
There you go.
Pat, I've heard you say, it reminds me of, like, we talk about, it's a genius when you do it, even when it's not necessary. So we're very prone, like, you're an inventor, right? You're very prone to inventing even when it's not necessary. And I think about that as it relates to enablement. We had a experience where me and Whitney also is a discerner enabler. We were at an event, and you're talking to some people at the event, and there's another gentleman at the event who she had seen talking for about an hour, and he hadn't had water. And so Whitney's primary, like, it almost bothered her to the extent, like, she's a relative stranger to this person. But I'm sitting there, I'm watching the same thing play out, and I have zero desire to get this gentleman water, while Whitney's enablement is so strong that she's like, I don't even know that guy, but I know that she's anticipating the needs. And I'm not trying to be reductionist, Pat, there you go again, about, like, enablement doesn't mean that you just go get someone water, but it is interesting that she's so compelled to want to help others and to want to anticipate the needs of others that she went and got this stranger a water. And me, with zero enablement, didn't even occur to me. But it was almost like, if you think about invention or discernment, our geniuses, if somebody were in a conversation next to me that was like, I don't really know how to solve this problem, I would feel the same way as a discerner. Like, I want to jump in. I want to do that. I want to, like, go out of my way to make that happen. And I think that's true. So Tracy and others with enablement are saying, I can't help but do that.
Yeah, it's painful to see a need that somebody has and not satisfy that. So we had a funny thing happen here in the office the other day. We had a Zoom meeting with all of our staff, and Tara, my new assistant, fantastic, she was in the room next to me. So she's right around the other side of this wall. Whitney, on the other hand, is in Colorado. So I'm playing with my teacup, talking, and I poke a hole in it, and it just bleeds all over my crotch and my desk. And I was like, oh, I just poked a hole in my cup. Whitney is sitting there going, I think I should text Tara to get him some napkins. And Tara's sitting next door going, hell if I care, because she doesn't have E, and it's bothering Whitney in Colorado. Pat needs napkins. It's just like, that's how we're wired. And it's just so funny and wonderful to see how it plays out. Now, there's another letter, though. When you're an E, you have another letter, and that gives a different context to how you use that.
Your other letter, my discernment is always informing my enablement. It's so hard for me to separate the two. They're so linked together. So my discernment is constantly informing my enablement.
Yeah. What I love about it, though, is when a person has enablement as one of their geniuses, it's always directed at people. Like one of the most interesting times is what I call an IE, the adaptable designer.
Yeah.
Right? And I know of a number of people that are IEs. It's not a completely rare type, but I haven't met that many. But they come up with new ideas all the time. And if somebody goes, yeah, I don't think I like that idea, they're like, okay, I'll come up with another one. And it's so true. And I know an executive at a huge company who's in charge, the chief people officer of a company, she's an IE. She has all these ideas about people, but if it doesn't land right away, she's like, I'll try something else. Whereas other people, so it's always about, is this serving you? And if not, I'll find another way. And it's really remarkable. And when you don't have people with enablement in your organization, it really shows. I don't care if they're WEs, IEs, DEs, and the rest.
Pat, the one other piece of this conversation that I think is tied to a podcast we just did around using the micro or like the upper and lowercase letters, the macro E versus the micro E. Sort of interesting because, that's why I think that as we're discovering this relational element of enablement is like Tracy does that for our whole company on a strategic level. She uses enablement to say, hey, we're moving in this direction. We have this priority. How do I get all of our departments aligned? And how do I help anticipate the needs of a person in a different area of the company? Like this was going to impact them. Let me go and make sure that we're all on the same page or we're all rowing in the same direction. And so I think that's an important part of this because it's not just like a tactical, let me help. When you spill water, it looks like you go to your next meeting looking like you peed your pants. It's like a very strategic thing for her to kind of view the entire company and say, how do I use enablement at that level?
Yeah, it's not just like, how can I serve you? But it's like the human element is primary for them. Mm-hmm. And that's necessary in strategic planning. When she edits my books, she's thinking, how are your readers going to respond to this? Are they going to understand this? And is this going to serve them? So that's how her D and the E go together. Now, something just occurred to me, and that is that even enablement has to be turned off sometimes. And it's hard because it's easy for my wife to say, hey, Pat, I don't need your invention right now. Just shut that down. It's like, this is not a time for invention. But it's so hard to say to somebody, hey, could you turn down your enablement? Because you're going to try to please me or please others. And right now we're doing something that we need to do this. And we need you to actually maybe push through and not please somebody. Because sometimes as a leader, you have to make decisions that aren't pleasing. And you almost have to turn down your antenna for enablement. Does that make sense, Tracy?
Oh, 100%. We all have to regulate our geniuses. I mean, we all have to do this. But I know that for me, I would say this is my personal experience, but I would say early in my career, that was very difficult for me. Now, we didn't have the language then, but to turn down my E it was so difficult. And now that I have the language, and of course I'm more mature and have more experience, it's really good for me to understand, this is a moment where I need to regulate. I don't need to jump in. And of course, my discernment informs that as well. But it is hard. It's hard for all of us to regulate, especially when you're dealing with human beings.
And I think E is the hardest because it makes it sound like when you do that, especially without our language, it sounds like you're telling them, stop caring. And you can really hurt a person with enablement by telling them, I wish you would quit thinking about people so much. But there are those moments, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a pastor, a CEO, a manager, where you have to go, actually, this is not the time where I should please them. I might have to do something that's good for them that's not enablement.
Well, I've seen that play out even in conversations on our executive team between you two, where Pat, you're inventing, and Tracy has this tension between, if you think about discernment and enablement, there's a portion of Tracy regularly with any idea that's like, well, I can help make that happen. So that's like if enablement is the lead card, then it's going to be like, well, any idea I can run with, I can probably help get it further down the tracks. And then there are times when you're like, hey, I don't want your enablement right now. I just need pure discernment, like almost like rational intellectual discernment without the relational side that always wants to help.
And as an enabler, that's so helpful for me when Pat says that to me, because I can it just lets the air out of the bag. Like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that in this moment. And it allows me to just fully lean into my discernment.
You know what's funny, Tracy? When we're working on the book, I think you're all discernment. You know what I mean? But oftentimes in the office, you'll see me inventing and being kind of a crazy inventor guy. And I know, and we've talked about this, you'll go, I think he needs a little bit of encouragement around this idea before I give him the discernment.
100%.
And it's great that you have that judgment about, oh yeah, right now, we just need to go, keep going. It's okay. I see some problems, but I'm not going to say them quite yet.
Yeah,
So
when you are in pure invention mode, I know, turn the D down. I can't discern anything. I need him to just invent, and then we could get to discernment eventually. But yeah, I love that. I love that play between invention and enablement.
You know, we have this friend, Kevin, and whenever I talk to him and I'm inventing, he gets this look on his face because E is not one of his things, but D is, and he'll be like, and I'm always like, oh man, I need you to go. Just for a few minutes before you go. And that's just that difference. It's funny. So for those people listening to this, I was making faces, one was skeptical and one was encouraging. So
yeah, and that is something that I've done my whole life, and now I know why I do that. That's my
exactly.
E. I'm constantly shaking my head and smiling at people because I want to encourage them.
You mean nodding your head?
Yes, not shaking. Yes, exactly. Yes. Nodding my head.
You are, as a speaker, man, it's great to have an audience full of people with E. I'd like to go to a conference with just GEs because they're the enthusiastic encourager and they'll be in the audience smiling and nodding. I could say anything and they'd be like, yes, that's brilliant. So, but there's a time and a place for that. So this is so interesting. If you're an E listening to this, we know there's subtleties there and it's not simple and it's really important to a team. And this is a good thing to talk about. One thing I will say is when a person has enablement, appreciate it. It is easy to take it for granted. And I do think it's important to go, that's a genius. We need it. Help us do that more. All right. I think that wraps us up. I think that's enough. Tracy, thanks for being back with us.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of everyone listening, you should come on more, but we're not going to force you. We're not going to force you.
I appreciate it.
All right.
That.
Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us and the Working Genius podcast. We love to have you here, and we will talk to you next time. God bless.